Welcome to the Lights On podcast, featuring stories behind building and running successful hotel businesses. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Lights On podcast. I'm Kin Seo, CEO of Lights On, and your host today. On this podcast, we share stories from across hospitality about building and growing hotel businesses. This episode is sponsored by Lights On. Lights On helps hotels grow revenue more consistently by managing pricing, distribution, and digital marketing together. We help hotels identify new revenue opportunities so they don't leave money on the table. We also run the full revenue and marketing operations for you, so the team on the ground can stay focused on the guest experience. If your hotel needs more revenue growth, visit lightson.co to learn more. Our guest today is our very own Keri Brown, Vice President of Commercial Strategy at Lights On. Keri built her entire career in Hawaii hospitality, coming up from Marriott, Hilton, Highgate, before rising to the Area Director of Commercial Strategy at Outrigger, where she was named one of the HSMAI's 2024 Top 25 Extraordinary Minds in Revenue Optimization and Distribution. She is one of the most decorated commercial strategy leaders working in Hawaii today. Super excited to have Keri today, not just today, but having Keri at Lights On. Welcome to the show, Keri.
Thanks, boss.
It's still good to be the boss. But well, before we talk shop, right? I think always nice to going back to the beginning, the starting point of everything. So you were originally trying to be a lawyer, right? So what put you into hospitality?
Hospitality for me was it was a big accident. I had, decided I didn't want to go to law school, and instead found myself moving into business school. And between years 1 and 2 of business school, they require an internship. And at an absolute loss as to what I wanted to do with this internship. I was lucky enough to have a really good friend that happened to be in the hospitality industry. He was in the learning development field, which is a branch of HR under the Starwood / now Marriott brand. And so I happened to just say, "Hey, Cor, can you take on an intern?" And he said yes. And we kind of started this whole journey with kind of an accidental decision to do that, which has been one of the greatest journeys that I've had the opportunity to be on. So I'm very thankful for that and for Corey, actually.
Wow. So with all the things that you can do in hospitality, when did you realize commercial strategy, revenue management specifically was where you wanted to build your career with?
My initial decision to try and get into revenue management was a pragmatic one. With a business degree, I wanted to do something that really spoke to all of the things that I was learning. And revenue management felt like something that was really oriented towards that business degree, really dealt with numbers and strategy in a way that sometimes operations couldn't necessarily facilitate for me. That being said, I will say, I grew up in operations. Before I was in revenue, I was a guest service manager and, a management trainee. So I was fortunate enough to be able to go through all of those departments. But revenue seemed like the smartest transition for me with a business degree to go into. So it didn't really start off as a passion. It was more pragmatic than that. But it really turned into one, which is cool.
Yeah. And very interesting that you have that operational side of background too. What did that experience being on the ground in the operation space in hospitality teach you that first, as somebody coming from revenue, they might have a finance background, fully number, they're living through spreadsheet day to day. Like, how did that operation side teach you that, a pure business or finance degree wouldn't teach you?
I think it is a constant reminder, and I will say that it's a reminder to this day that running a hotel, it's a business in totality. And when you're looking at the hotel operation and you're looking at the teams that run that operation, they're truly the heart of the hotel. And when you run revenue, yes, it's about revenue and rate and occupancy, but that occupancy really does continue to drive hours for these team members, in housekeeping and engineering at the front desk. And it's a constant reminder that what you do really does have impact to other people's lives, and you want to continue to do it well. It really gives you a purpose that sometimes you don't often find when you're just simply framing a job as making money for other people. And so I have a real soft spot in my heart for the operation, how it works, and the leaders that need to run that operation as well. I mean, it's not an easy business. And there are a lot of people that are dependent upon the success of these hotels. And so for me, operations really grounds me in everything that I do. Regardless of whether or not I decided to, pursue it as a career. It's certainly something that's a constant reminder for me to continue to want to do well, to do good for other people.
Yeah, it is a humbling moment where beyond the spreadsheet and data analysis, there's a real life consequences when a button is clicked on your computer and whatnot, right? Just knowing that many investors and owners, right, think about owning a hotel is an asset, but like the true part is that there's that human aspect of it that all the operations, it needs the team on the ground to really execute it. Any decisions will lead to certain consequences, whether it's going to be from a guest perspective, as well as from the team's perspective as well. So just knowing that, something that we really strong believe is that like we want to take the part, the number side of the things, the financial side of things, out of the way, so that really like allowing the team to on the ground to really do their best to deliver that guest experience, which funnel back to the financial performance of a property. So I think everything comes back to a full circle.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a very it's an important concept to think about beyond just the numbers. And it's one thing that attracted having Keri here is just having that principle is just kind of how we do everything. So just time fast forward. So you've been through different branded properties, independents, big groups, small groups. You were even on the OTA side at some point. So I think it was a variety of experience. Getting to Outrigger, you spent quite a few years there and led some of the major rebranding effort for some of the iconic properties in Waikiki, right? Can you walk us through what you actually had to do that just leading the commercial strategy side of things for this kind of rebrand exercise?
I think my introduction to Outrigger was actually my introduction into repositioning a property. I started out with Outrigger as the revenue director for the Waikiki Beachcomber. And the Waikiki Beachcomber was going from an IHG to an independent brand. And so I think it was probably maybe a week into the full like rebranding and all the back end systems transitions and cutovers that really I started with Outrigger. And what I realized really quickly was that in order to reposition a property like that, especially with the expectations that came along with an investment that big, in the $30-40 million range, was everybody had to be talking to each other. And I think that was something that really has continued to stick with me, even to this day, is how everybody interacts and making sure that everybody has kind of a singular purpose and everybody's moving in the right direction. And with a brand repositioning like this, that often includes, of course, the revenue strategy component of things, but also marketing, also sales, because we're really stripping away what people understand about this hotel and about what this hotel represents and what it means, and really starting to build up something brand new. With the new product comes, a new feel for the hotel, a new language for the hotel, the sounds of the hotel. When we first started with just what does this hotel sound like, feel like, taste like, smell like? All of those things are really essential components to how a guest understood the hotel. And you wouldn't think that always connects with revenue and pricing, but unless a guest really understands what they're purchasing and what they're getting into, then they're not going to pay the money for it. So it really was important to really connect all those dots and make sure that there was a healthy brand identity so that when it came to selling this hotel and selling it at a rate premium from what everybody was expecting historically, that we were able to do so because people really understood the value of what they were getting. And that translates into how a hotel is sold. We have salespeople for group, we have salespeople for our leisure markets, we have salespeople for our Asia sales, and making sure that that brand identity is percolated through everything that the sales organization is doing is so important because it provides consistency. You can't have somebody who has one understanding of the brand and somebody else who has a complete other understanding, and expect that any sort of continuity exists. And so it's really finding a way to pull all of that all the way through the process, and making sure that at the end of the day, and it's a lengthy process. It took far longer than I had ever anticipated it taking. But it's one that needs to happen in order to successfully reposition a hotel in this way. And we had the great opportunity to do so a number of times, right? So we did Waikiki Beachcomber, and then came Outrigger Reef, and then came Waikiki Paradise. And right now, the company is going through another big reposition with Outrigger Waikiki on Kalakaua. And so this is a company that continues to reinvent how people experience what Waikiki is. And it's really exciting to be a part of those types of transformations. So as you can already tell, I loved and adored my time at Outrigger. And I think it just provided me with such a wealth of different types of experiences that I probably couldn't have gotten in other places. So
well, we are gonna have some questions around that, but before we get to it, I think something that you mentioned was it could be so overlooked by people. It's about aligning teams from different disciplines, talking the same language, having the same common goal. It's something that we internally constantly talking about challenges that we face. Working with our clients, right? Like traditionally, the way hotel, especially the bigger hotel groups, right? They kind of separate out. We have the marketing, the revenue, the sales team, the operations team. They all have their own goals and KPIs and their way of interpreting. What success looks like, right? And you kind of coming from the revenue discipline, and over time getting into we now constantly talking about commercial strategy versus just like a revenue or marketing. Like what and it sounds like the dream state that you kind of got to through the repositioning exercise at Outrigger. Like what is missing in the industry, why like nowadays that are making it challenging for everyone to move to that direction?
I think it's an adaptability thing. And it's really taking what we've historically understood as a revenue discipline or a sales discipline or a marketing discipline. Even as we talk about sales and marketing, oftentimes those are lumped into one, but those are two completely separate disciplines with completely separate superpowers that they're able to leverage. And so it's really being able to kind of understand how we did things in the past, but be willing to make those changes as we move into the future because it is changing. And the change isn't necessarily people going further in different directions. The change is requiring further integration. And like you said, that language verbiage that you had used is really, really relevant. You have a salesperson, you have a marketing person, you have a revenue person. They're in the same revenue strategy meeting, but they're all speaking completely different languages. And as somebody in a different discipline, you often are you're tuning out because the language isn't the same. And so it's really finding that similar language that everybody can use to move in the same direction. And I think that's oftentimes missing. We're so set in our ways sometimes. We're so like dogmatic about how things need to be for revenue. And this is our lane, and we are not going to deviate from our lane. But in the grand scheme of these are the rules that you need to abide by, rules are also there in some ways to be broken. And sometimes that breaking those rules make things better, and it makes things more functional. And it really leads to further collaboration. And collaboration is that piece that's really difficult, right? We can say, you guys have all the same KPIs. This is your new target that you have to get to. But really, the difficult part is really getting buy-in from the people. And the people part is the complicated aspect of running a team, of, building an organization. And so it's really getting everybody to buy into that and to really believe in it. And then once you can achieve that, everybody moving in the same direction, everybody having the same language seems like not that much of an uphill battle.
Yeah. People tend to forget there's always the science and the art part of commercial strategy and revenue optimizations, right? We always get the myths about hey, you guys revenue optimization people, right? It's all about the numbers. It's about the black and white, the right or wrong. When it many times coming back to the artistic part of the communications, how you convey that language to people with different discipline. It's not just about the peers, right? We constantly being in front of clients, owners, investors, asset managers, also being able to translate that language to people in different hats. Like it's just so undervalued than just purely driving performance and interpreting data and optimize the numbers, right? Like if that message is not being conveyed and being brought up by being like everybody's on board for that message and the goal and the progress and the execution, everything tends to fall apart.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is we have all these metrics about how to gauge performance, but we really, I was reading Simon Sinek a while back, and, he talks about how there's metrics for performance, but we really have no healthy metrics to understand how the softer skills are impacting, not only revenue, but overall health of the team and the team performance. And so, but those are the things that wind up being the most important, right? The things that we don't have benchmarks against, that we don't have KPIs against oftentimes. And so it's really interesting to try and figure out how we do that and how we drive performance and how we drive levels of trust and all of those things that are really hard to measure, because they wind up being more important oftentimes than the black and white KPIs that we can put out there and say, this is what it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. So from that experience, obviously, we just talked about that experience at Outrigger just being amazing, and not saying easy. I mean, it's a very challenging journey to do some of those big undertaking and getting those to the finish line. I think it's hard to trade that experience to like anywhere else. And at some point, you decided to leave that kind of one of the most Hawaii's most recognized brand to join Lyson, which is a completely different beast of like it's more like a boutique consulting strategy firm for other hoteliers, right? What make this change make sense for you?
I think as we were moving, as I was moving through the last kind of year and a half, and really taking stock of what I wanted to do, the idea of Lights On was just so exciting for me. It was a different sort of challenge. It was exercising a different type of muscle than I had been used to with Outrigger. And I think I will say that, Outrigger has this special place in my heart because one, I was there for so long, and the teams there were amazing. But when this opportunity came up to really find ways of bringing what Outrigger was so good at, actually bringing that into an environment of independent hotels who really don't always have the opportunity to have that type of strategy at their disposal, the type of strategy that's often centralized around big brands with a lot of resources. The opportunity to find ways of taking some of what I've learned and then bringing that into an independent hotel space. This might not sound the most professional, but it was cool. It was like, it felt cool to be able to do that. And so, when we had the opportunity to talk and connect, it was like, wow, this is something fun. It's a new type of challenge for me. And I, if nothing else, love a challenge. So really being able to do that. And, I've only been with the company now for probably about, what, 3.5 months at this point, give or take. But it's been a lot of fun getting to know clients and really understanding what they have at their disposal right now and how we can find ways of interspersing the things that, have come along with the many, many decades of my experience into their environment and into their independent ecosystem. It's cool.
The thing when I think about because I through our portfolio we work with bigger companies, smaller companies, have sub all the way to 300 plus rooms, something as small as like 12 rooms, right? Like I think kind of piggyback on what you mentioned, right? Like the bigger groups with bigger budgets, right? They tend to have the luxury of hiring all these right people in the right discipline. They have a full force of all of those teams that we talk about, the marketing, the revenue, operations, and all that. A small hotel, 20, 30 keys, like they will never be able to afford that, right? So I'm just thinking about the way that we can democratize like what the big guys could enjoy to now the smaller owners and hoteliers. Now I think kind of this is kind of the mission of Liaison to find a way to make that model work so that the smaller really the small business owners, right, at this point get to enjoy the same advantage of a group with bigger budget could enjoy. So I think this is there are many consulting firms, strategy firms, marketing agencies, what have you out there. I think they all are kind of thinking about completing certain tasks. I think what we, Liaison here, want to build truly is being that thinking partner, a group and people who really cared about the client success. Because now we think about how to really like bring that in the world of capitalism, right? Hey, now these big guys enjoy all of these things. How can we actually like steal that and put it to the main street? It's not just like the Wall Street anymore. I think this is the part where I find it super exciting about, and it was actually like our honor, and we feel so lucky to have somebody like you to actually join as part of this mission. And to me, it's almost like a movement, right? To bring Robin Hood style, kind of bring it from the region and kind of bring it like bring this thing to the smaller people, right? It is a very exciting journey and mission that we are carrying out right now. So
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. I think
yeah.
there's so much fun about, taking the interconnectedness of the strategy that is afforded to some of the bigger brands. And, they're not always executing at the ideal, but the theory of it, the theory of how interconnected each of these commercial disciplines should and needs to be. And you combine that with how we streamline operations and how we streamline our processes and distribution to make it fit into an independent space. It's like a puzzle. And it's so much fun to constantly try and put the puzzle together, but then continue to optimize it. Like all of a sudden it goes from a 2D puzzle to a 3D puzzle, and there's a lot of fun things that can come along with it. So to your point, it's such an amazing start to a journey, and I can just only imagine where it can go from here.
Yeah. Well, let's try to bring those the grand big concepts into executions and implementations, right? So walk us through a scenario when we take on a new hotel clients, right? The way it usually works is like, we have clients coming in revenue is not going the way it should be. It's not financially a good situation, especially when current market is not doing the best in terms of like the tourism, travel, and all that. We coming in as the trusted partner for a hotel. What do you look at first to understand the problem?
And this has been the most interesting thing about joining Lights On is that process for me has continued to evolve a little bit in trying to understand what we need to be looking at initially to really find what low-hanging fruit we're aiming for at the moment. And so it really starts with an understanding. And, we were talking earlier about how the people thing is really important, but there are very technical aspects of revenue management that can't be extracted. There are very black and white things that we need to look at. And, for me, as somebody who started out their career in the revenue management field, I really do start with the tech stack, what technologies we're looking at, but more importantly, how those technologies are connected. And I think that's a theme throughout our entire conversation, right? Is the interconnectedness of everything. And that falls in line with our technology as well. What connects to what? How are things working? How is the ARI, availability rates, inventory? How is that flowing throughout each of the systems that run this hotel? And then, it's taking a look at all of the rate codes that are built, all of the promotional activity we have out there. And so, we've begun doing what we call a rate audit, and basically pulling all of the information from all of the systems and putting it in one centralized spot so that we can really see what we have that we're working with. Because really, to go in and try and fix something that you don't understand is probably the worst idea in the world. So really taking a look at what is there and what building blocks we have to work with is, for me, the best way to start. And once I understand how the connection works internally, I can start figuring out how connections work externally, because we have dozens of connections within our systems to outside sources, and making sure we understand those and making sure that we get how the connection is feeding in and how we can optimize it. Like all of those things, right? It makes no sense if you're treating a head cold if, something is wrong, like very wrong internally with how your blood is flowing or how it's flowing into certain organs. So it's really important to understand how everything works functionally at the beginning. And then once you do that, you can start treating all of the symptoms and all of the things that, might not be performing optimally from a sales standpoint. And then from a marketing standpoint, obviously for hotels that are independent, that don't have the unlimited marketing budgets that some of these brands have, right? It's about leveraging visibility. And so the way you leverage visibility is to make sure the brand is strong and healthy and the name is out there. But that doesn't mean anything if, you have a CTA that you click into and something is broken because nothing is connected the right way. Like it's make all of those things at the most basic of levels really drives the performance and the KPIs that we're setting forth for sales, for marketing. And so for me, it's starting at the very basic building blocks, and that becomes technology and rates. And to that side for it.
Well, well, let me try to use an analogy because as we are getting to this technicality, right? Usually, this is where hoteliers, if they did not grow up in this discipline or grow in this space, right? I think what we just said, they'll be like, what the heck are Keen and Keri talking about, right? If you think about, I'm gonna use Apple as a company as an analogy, right? Everybody think Apple is a product company, right? Great, Steve Jobs, the legendary, created, all these stuff are really like great products, the MacBook, the iPhones and all that. People kind of think about it that way. And when, the current CEO, Tim Cook's coming in, they'll be like, who's this guy? Like, he's not innovative. He just, doesn't have the same charisma like Steve Jobs. little did people know that Tim Cook is a legendary in a different space. Like he's like the supply chain expert that really like 100x the profitabilities of Apple. And the way he does it is like really figuring out a optimal way to build the supply chain of manufacturing an iPhone, right? You could have a really nice looking, the best iPhone ever, but if you don't know how the ways to actually assemble it, design it, shipping all these parts across the globe, Apple can be the way they are today. And the success behind it is really about the supply chain, which is like it's a basically what Keri was just talking about, right? When we think about selling hotel as a product to the consumer, right? How do people discover this product? How do people understand the experience? How do people actually discover it and finding that at the right price at the right time that will make them actually book? I think that spider web of distribution, pricing, and discovery, and now actually layering marketing and branding on top of it to make the product, the experience, the stay just feel so like compelling for somebody to actually book. Uh, these are all the dark magic of commercial strategy, revenue management, and marketing. And when everything works together, that kind of gets to like having a well-run commercial engine for a hotel. So I think kind of dumbing down to what Keri just mentioned, like these are all what needs to happen under the hood. And for many occasions that we run into, these are the things that are not necessarily like difficult. It just needs to be intentional. Like many hoteliers, when they first start running a hotel is um they all think about providing the best guest experience, right? And to do that, they would never think about, you have all these systems, you have all these like OTAs, like Expedia, Booking.com, Airbnb, like everything's, there are ways to be configured in such a way that is optimal. When everything is optimized in such a way, which is like the thing that keeps Keri excited every day, like that makes a huge difference on how a hoteler can really monetize and while providing the best experience ever for their guests. So, these are the kind of the low hanging fruit many times we see hoteliers missed because it's not intentional. It's a knowledge that was kept by the big boys for the longest time. So just the fact that looking through these small tiny things, understanding how the system work, technology stack that you mentioned, I think it was a big thing that hoteliers tend to miss, right? Because over time, everybody was trying to build Frankenstein, right? They start with the property management system, the PMS. Later on when people, technology vendors coming and say, hey, you should get on a channel managers, get on this GDS, get on all these OTAs. Before you know it, hoteliers are already managing like 10, 15, 20 different systems. They're all talking to each other, not in optimal ways, right? So now coming in, solving the puzzle of connecting all those things in a much more optimal way, instantly, like anyone can just save and earn much more through that process.
Yeah. And sometimes it means disconnecting some of those things.
Yeah. Well, more concrete example. So what's the most common thing that you find that owners didn't know that was costing them money?
I think as we're looking at the independent space, I think one thing that the independent world sometimes still struggles with a bit is the understanding of just how important it is for us to work with our third parties as it is to work with our direct channels. There is absolutely no doubt that optimizing our direct channels is the most profitable way to make revenue in any hotel. But realistically, what independent hotels struggle with is visibility. They don't have the benefit of a global brand. And so to be able to leverage not only the paid direct efforts that we have, which, here at Lights On, we're pretty darn good at, I have to say that. We really do a great job of utilizing the tools at our disposal on the direct side to build that brand equity within any space. But oftentimes that's not enough in the global playground that we play in. And so when you have partners like our OTAs, like Priceline, Agoda, like Expedia, one thing that we often forget is those aren't just discount channels. They're not just asking for promotions. They're visibility levers. And for us to be able to find ways to creatively leverage that without giving away too much, on the net rate side, but to leverage those into something that really works for us, not only as a hotel and a revenue stream, but really helps to figure out ways to drive direct bookings through those visibility levers. I think that becomes something that makes performance, it just adds icing on the cake with regard to performance, I think. And so it's something that we don't often think about in the independent space, because it's often a us versus them sort of thing, right? No, we can't land the OTAs because we have to focus on direct, but and I get it. I understand that. But at the same time, if we start looking at these, third parties as partners, and we don't have to choose all of them, right? We choose the select few that actually work for the brand, and that are in alignment with the messaging that we want. But to lever those into something that works for us as a hotel overall, I think is something that's incredibly intelligent to do. But it again requires a level of connectivity. It requires a level of understanding between the different platforms, and the different strategies that we're working through for those platforms, to be able to find those connections to really make things work and really further optimize things to get to a point where, we get the best performance that we could possibly get. There are just so many things, but I think that's one thing that I often find is we forget how to use our third parties, for what they were developed for. OTAs were developed for the independent hotels because they didn't have a global brand behind them. And so this gave them that ability. Why not use them for what that is and get that visibility, and help us to drive direct bookings as well?
Well, let's continue that contrarian topic, because that gets into our daily conversation with clients. The OTA versus web direct, right? I think people still tend to think about it as like a either or, right? And I think like what you just said, and kind of our principles in general, just thinking everything at a global level for a property, right? I think like our view is pretty contrarian from that sense. Like, yes, direct booking, it is a top goal to driving that. And really, if we think about that in first principles, right? Like all everyone is asking is about, how can I acquire incremental net new businesses in the lowest cost possible? And I think what we usually find is web direct are not necessarily the cheapest every time. Like for the most part, probably cheaper, but for many times, like, if we think about all the brand investments, all the all the payouts, right? All the technology fees, maintaining the website to its best state so that like attracts people to come in and book. All of those are oftentimes not being baked into the equation of like, if now we kind of build a full picture of like cost of acquisition by channels, and we add up those things that people tend not to think about. It surprised many people that OTA is actually not as expensive as people would think. Don't get me wrong, it could still be expensive if it's not being used the right way, right? And I think like the whole solving puzzle piece that really like again driving Keri excited is that until we look at the full picture and understanding how each channel really drive businesses for a property or a hotel, it's not a black and white answer on yes, let's always go for let's drive direct. There might be things that we can do like in a relatively short amount of time to drive new businesses without like, signing your life to OTAs, right? I think it's a matter of like using these third party channels the right way versus blindly that just turn everything on and just give up all the business to them that, hoteliers doesn't feel the control. I think the principle, like being able to control, being able to pull the lever as needed, not a always on. It is a strategy piece that we always kind of start with at the beginning of our engagement to help people kind of understand that full picture.
Yeah, agree. I mean, I agree. And it's a really big deal for hotels as they're kind of going through this type of analysis to really understand what their cost of acquisition is, and not just theoretically. In theory, direct, yes, is the lowest cost of acquisition channel, but put the numbers behind it. Like, run the numbers and actually see and understand what those acquisition costs are, because once you have a really healthy understanding and a very granular understanding of what your cost of acquisition is per channel, it really helps to drive what your strategy looks like. And sometimes it's the same strategy, but sometimes it may change based on what you discover with all of these numbers that you've actually run, and that are realistic for your own hotel. So I think it's a really interesting exercise to do, because more and more it's less about just making sure we get as much top line revenue as possible, and it's more about how do we work to shift those channels in a way that is cost effective for the hotel at the bottom line.
Yeah.
And so it's just such an interesting thing to do that really helps to enhance the strategy, and it really makes that strategy more robust when you have that understanding.
Yeah, and I think a good exercise for listeners today, right, to think about is, we have a secret weapon. We have a silver bullet to get anyone to 100% web directs, no OTAs, like overnight. Like, you just go back, you turn off all your OTA channels, bam, the next day you're gonna have 100% web direct channel mix. Is anyone willing to do that? Probably not. So just knowing that we all need to depend on these third-party channels to help your product, your property, your hotel to reach more people. Like, it is a necessary evil, right? Now, if you have to use it anyway, why not find a way to optimize them so that you get the best out of it and you have control, not let them control you. And everything that we mentioned is not a set it and forget it, right? Because we do that today, maybe 3 months from now, things change, seasonality shifts. Now it makes sense to constantly be looking at that and actually find the dynamic optimum mix every so often. So it is not a set it and forget it. It needs to be constantly be looked at and revisit. And ultimately, right, all these exercises are all going back to, how can we maximizing, minimizing the cost of, acquiring all these guests coming to your hotel, right? Don't be afraid of OTA, right? Especially first time guests, they usually use all these OTAs because, they have a membership there, right? They use that, book it, come here for the first time, first day, right? Now, hotel is your job to really wow this guest, to showcase your experience, to showcase what your brand and the guest experience is about. Now you have all the opportunities to come in, capture this person, capture this guest, make sure that it come back next time, they're going to book direct. If somebody coming back being a repeat guest and they're not booking direct, we have a big problem to deal with.
Yeah, agreed. And one thing I learned in my previous lives, especially from my ops mentors, is once the guest hits the desk to check in, they're your guest. And it's up to you to capture all of their information and really transform that. And I mean, every OTA guest that comes in, and my OTA partners are going to kill me for saying this, but the truth of the matter is every OTA guest has the opportunity to be a direct guest in the future. And it's just making sure that you have those strategies in place with the desk, and making sure that, they are aware of just how important it is to capture all of that information and really move that guest over from a third party booking into a direct guest. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
But it's a strategy that's put into place. It sits outside of the revenue strategy, but it's revenue strategy, right? It's a way to capture direct guests in that way. And that's how operations continues to participate in the revenue strategy of a hotel, is to work on converting third-party guests into direct guests. And also, we don't often talk about the TripAdvisors of the world, and how important it is for those reviews to come in, because those reviews not only lead to more bookings, hopefully coming in for direct, but it also allows the revenue team the opportunity, once their ranking is higher, the revenue team has the opportunity to increase rates because there's more value there.
Yeah.
So the ops team is not in outside of where the revenue strategy sits. They're smack dab in the middle with everybody else.
Yeah. Oh, so aside from those topics, right? What what's another example of underused level that you see independent hotels are sitting on right now that are not well used but could drive additional revenue?
So I think, a lot of that has to do with how we integrate with our operations team. I think that's something that I've been seeing often is, um, you know, the, for the ops teams that we work with here at Lights On, I mean, they're tremendous. But I think as I look back in past lives and I try and identify what that integration has historically been between operations and between revenue, it's kind of a contentious relationship. We often talk about the contentious relationship between sales and revenue, but operations and revenue sometimes can be that way too, because, we get into the situation where you need to oversell a hotel to get a perfect sell. The oversell doesn't wash, and all of a sudden ops is absolutely and rightfully so mad because now they have guests coming in and we have nowhere to put them. But the operations team is such an integral part of driving ancillary revenue, and different types of channel shifts throughout, right? We talked about how they can help convert a third party to a direct guest. But you talk about ancillary revenue streams, you talk about upsells, you talk about early check-in, late checkout, all of those things that require interaction at the front desk. But oftentimes we just kind of leave it to, okay, well, if they want to upgrade, they can. If not, whatever. But really putting some intention behind that, providing, if we have 15 different room categories, which is not outside of the realm of possibility for some hotels, really, putting marketing behind it and showing people and demonstrating why it would be worth it to be able to upgrade their room from a, city view to an ocean front. And, pictures speak 1,000 words. Why not put it on an iPad and see, like, this is what it looks like, this is what you would be getting if you were to upgrade to an oceanfront. Things like that, just putting that sort of intention behind how you drive an ancillary revenue stream can often drive, a couple of dollars worth of RevPAR points, if you're really doing it right. And so I think that's one thing that I see that often kind of falls off the radar, because there are other things, right, we're dealing with on the revenue side, but that integration, that constant communication with the ops team to really drive revenue in the ancillary fields is such an important part of things. And I think, I saw it really play out, especially I recognized it and saw it play out with my teams over at Hilton Hawaiian Village. And I was in lockstep with our director of front office, and I would be down there every other day talking to the front desk team about the importance of upsells and, why we were selling the way we were selling, because we needed them to get things, we need them to get to those revenue streams. And you would be absolutely blown away by what the front desk is able to do when given a strategy and saying, hey, I support you. I think you can do whatever you need to do. I have your back, and let's see what we can get. That team was tremendous in achieving that. And I was so stoked to see the results, and they were stoked. And that's kind of the big thing, right? They were
Yeah.
stoked as well. So it was cool.
It just remind me of that experience, back in Las Vegas, right? It's very known for, you come into the front desk, you try to, do like a bribe like, $20 to get that upgrade, right? Now thinking about from a hotel perspective, how much missed revenue and opportunities and upsell that could be on the P&L, right? Like I think these are a solid example to show like when operations. Now thinking about like commercial strategy, right? I think like every discipline has that the role to play, right? When operations team is well trained and aligned on what's important, when they're trained the right way, to produce some of those upsell opportunities, right? Like it just so many things that hoteliers can just implement. It's not like overnight, but like you can definitely start like today. So, last question to just wrap us out for the show here, right? So I'm just gonna be quoting you something you said a while back in 2019.
Oh,
Um,
come on.
Back then, you believe that revenue management is the future of hospitality. Now that with everything that we mentioned, with the transition, kind of, we're now talking a lot more commercial strategy versus just revenue strategy, right? What like how does your mindset shift to that? And what do you think with our principle of commercial strategy right now? Like what elements are still missing?
Are you asking me if I thought I was wrong or right?
I'll let you interpret that.
I think well, clearly I'm going to say I was right. But I think I was wrong and I was right. I think, the rise of revenue management is unquestionable. And I think it's a discipline that has evolved so heavily over the course of the last decade and a half, to really become, I think, um, my former chief commercial officer, Sean D, put it in the best way: revenue is the quarterback. They're the closest to all of the information, and they're the first ones to really see kind of those indicators very early, right? Um, so I think, revenue has become so inextricably linked with hotel performance, that it's hard to say that, it's one of the most important things. But I will say, like, as I've moved into different realms of the commercial world, um, it's not the end all be all, because you can have a revenue, you know, team that sees and notices all of the indicators coming through, but they really have to know what to do with that, and they really have to know how to communicate with the teams that drive visibility and that drive the partnership relationships that help to drive visibility and the timing of all of those different things. And so for me, it's the commercial engine that really is going to wind up driving um, overall hotel performance. And the more that it's optimized, the better it is. But that involves all of the commercial disciplines. And I don't leave out distribution, because distribution is an essential part of it. It's the building blocks of all of the things that we do as a commercial engine. So all of those things working together in concert. One thing, if you want to talk about 2017, we can go back to 2010. I was doing my management trainee interview with the Starwood team, and they asked me what my favorite sound was. And I told them that my favorite sound was a symphony, because, one instrument sounds beautiful and played expertly. It's just an amazing thing. But all of these instruments played together, play beautifully, really, there's no comparison. And the same holds true for commercial strategy. One instrument can be optimized and doing everything that it's supposed to do, but without the other ones, it's not it's not fully there yet. And the goal is to be fully there. Um, have I perfected the way it, looks and feels and sounds? And if absolutely not, got to be kidding. It's so complicated. Um, but it doesn't mean we don't keep trying, right? We have to keep trying. We have to keep optimizing, because I think if there's anything that I've learned over the course of my career, at least, is the only thing that you can predict is change, and you have to learn to adapt to it. And that's what commercial strategy is continually adapting. And the sooner you buy into that, the better off you'll be.
Yeah. And it's also a core principles of how Liaison operates too, right? To your point, change is the only constant in the world nowadays, especially every advancements in AI that we're seeing right now. We are constantly now talking about, bringing, AI, the workflows, not just at the level of, asking ChatGPT questions, right? Now start building that into how we look at data, how we streamline our operations. We start doing some of these pet projects that actually it was awesome, right? A big, even our show, right? I think lots of the structure and all that, like these are the things that are all powered by AI. To have a really deep questions and discussion and things like that. We can't be just doing that alone anymore, right? So finding ways to constantly growing and learning the latest things and actually apply those for our hotel clients, right? I think that's the other big aspect. Like everything that you're listening right now, it may be 3 months from now, 6 months from now, everything changed again. And we probably have to do another episode again, just talking about the new changes. Keri's not going to like it because I drag him to this podcast, but it's so true. And this is kind of the platform that we want to build. Is we want to always provide that latest and greatest, not just the stories from the past, but also the trend for the future and how we can capitalize it and actually turn that into success and victories for our clients. So I just want to wrap the show with that.
Love it.
Yeah, normally I will ask guests where to find them, but in this case, internally, right? If everyone wanna just listen to more of insights like this, follow and subscribe our show, the Liaison Podcast. If you want to learn about what we do as a company, you want to have a conversation with us, go to www.liaison.co. Keri, thanks so much for hopping on.
Thanks, boss.
Thanks for listening to the Lights On podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.